Continuing on with this idea of enterprise architecture in miniature, the idea of architecture for a one-person organisation, and the idea of using as an example a digital nomad, van life idea, if you like. So we've so far looked at the big picture and the first steps. What we're looking at now is the move from, in terms of 5 elements, moving from context towards practical scopes. So to do that, some of the scopes I found while I was looking at this were looking at best practices, looking at what the business models might be, what the operating models might be, what kind of things I need to develop to make it work, and what at each stage of that might be the minimum usable product or service so that it can pay its way as it goes along. So for best practices, I looked up some of the examples that were around for digital nomads, and they talked about the need for a business model. Well, that's one thing I've got, that's the whole idea here. Describe, document and promote what you're doing through things like YouTube, which again is a core idea of what I'm doing here. I need to have financial reserves for problem issues and so on, which again, that's where investment comes in, that's part of the plan. I need to do live prototypes, which is something I haven't done yet and I need to move towards. That's what the major driver is right now. And then look at the equipment that I need to make it work. On the one side, the tools that I have, but on the other, things like cameras and so on. And I need to learn how the utilities work, water, light, power, access, all of those kind of things, and also learn how to maintain everything, including the vehicle itself on the road. So the first one of these was about business model. What would be a viable business model? Well, actually there's a lot to it. I might start from business model canvas and immediately I can see there are multiple parts to the business model. There are teaching, for example. We've said teaching is part of it. Documenting and self-promoting itself becomes an income stream. The idea of engaging people in the work brings its own value, which may not be money, but is still part of the business model. So we're moving from business canvas slowly towards enterprise canvas, looking at the services. So here's one example, would be a part of a business model, might be that we build a business model around you come in with an idea and go out with an initial plan for action. Now the tools that I would use from that, from the existing tool set that I had, would be something like SCORE, to look at strategy and the strategic options and choices and what we do about them. I've used the tool called the HoloMap, which is understanding an idea of context and stakeholders in that context. Looking at the services for which I would use Enterprise Canvas as a tool, and the service cycle about connections between services and what's needed to make that all work. Now we could cover that in an hour to 2 hours. There's a real business model about really practical ways of helping people understand what their choices are, effectively using enterprise architecture to support the enterprise architecture of small organisations. I need to look at a viable operating model, how the actual operations of all of this would work. For example, for that I look a lot at Enterprise Canvas and look at how the support services work, about how different things, different themes, value themes thread through every part of the process. I need to look at development tasks. On the one side, making sure that my tool sets are viable, all the thinking tools like SCORE, SCAN and so on. On the other, I need to look very much at the van build sequence, because again, I need to look at what the minimum usable product or service is at each stage of the van build in order to be able to move around and be a digital nomad, to teach around the place. So I need to look at what is the sequence of the build, and then what is the minimum that I could do in relation to the business models I've just looked at each stage of that build. That's what we do to start getting real about the enterprise architecture for a single person organisation and putting it into practice.